We're talking actors and directors who put on the shows.
We're talking playwrights and designers who you'll want to know.
From the very first rehearsal to the final curtain call.
We might be off Broadway, but we're talking about it all.
'Cause we're two local gals
With global pals, it's everything, everything, everything theater.
with Benita.
And Ellen. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Everything Theater podcast, the podcast where we talk about
Everything theater. Gosh, that's so much fun. Hi, everybody. I'm Benita Zahn.
And I am Ellen Cribbs. And before we jump in today, I want to let everyone know that we are sponsored by iTheater Saratoga. If you didn't hear our podcast with them a few weeks ago, please check them out. They're such a cool group. They are doing a world premiere production of Agatha Christie's The Murder of Roger Ackroyd. Immerse yourself in the world of Detective Hercule Poirot as he unravels one of Dame Agatha's most acclaimed and timeless masterpieces. Don't miss this classic murder mystery adapted by Mary Jane Hansen, who was on our podcast. You can get the tickets at itheatersaratoga.org. It runs October 27th through November 5th. Check it out.
It'll be great. And I just want to give props to Ellen and her fabulous cast. She just had a very successful run over at Theater Voices of All in the Timing. Bravo, bravo.
Thank you. It was fun, but yeah, only 4 shows. So it was, we just started and we were done before you knew it.
Yeah. and we're going to use that as the entree to our most fabulous guest tonight. Leigh Strimbeck. She is a writer, an actor, a teacher, a director, co-founder of WAM Theater. Leigh, the only thing that doesn't say on your bio is do you do windows and floors?
I do at home all the time.
You are just a Renaissance woman, and we've also got to tip our hat. You just finished. Sadly, it was a short run. I want to talk about that, and then shortened by what do they say? Rona came to visit at your theater, not you, blessedly. The Glass Menagerie at the Bridge Street Theater. And if you have ever seen Leigh on stage, you know that this is a role that she was meant to play. And as the critic Bob Gephardt said, he referred to as fearless. And despite being everything that an awful mother is, you were sympathetic. So bravo.
Thank you. It's actually the second time I played the part. I played it 30 years ago. I was with a theater ensemble in Pennsylvania that is still there, one of the oldest ensembles in America, the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble. And the reason more people don't know about the company, I'm still an associate artist there, is because we never went equity. And why did we never go equity? Because we refurbished a 1920s movie theater, and it's a 360-seat house, which I believe would make us a Lort B contract. So we wouldn't last 2 weeks. But for 45 years, that company has been producing 5 shows a year, 26 weeks of classroom tours, summer productions, teaching, and owns 2 buildings and pays a staff and an ensemble of actors a living wage in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. And that's where I worked for 10 years. And during that time, I did Amanda. I also did Martha and Virginia Woolf, which is another role I've done twice. I mean, you know, typecasting. But it was really fun. It was fun to go back to Amanda. It's a whole different thing since the first time I played, I didn't have kids, and now I have kids in their 20s. So,
And how did it change for you approaching it as a performer, Leigh?
well, for one thing, I had more time. You know, when you're acting and directing in 5 shows a season, you don't have a lot of research time. And this time I read 2 Tennessee Williams books. I read his memoirs and I read the book Tom, which takes you all the way up to the opening of Glass Menagerie. It's not the second half of his life, which in a way became more and more tragic through addiction and things like that. What I learned was that Edwina was his mother's name. And Amanda is Edwina. I didn't realize how not fictional she was. that he quotes her, that there are ways that she fell onto a couch and fainted and rolled her eyes back, that people witnessed and said, oh yeah, she would do that. They would, these things happened. And so the play was even more closely autobiographical than I knew, with the exception of she and her husband did stay married in real life. They just pretty much loathed each other. But St. Louis, the fire escape entrance to the apartment, the daughter who has mental illness, of course, was about his sister Rose, who eventually was lobotomized and institutionalized for the rest of her life. And the sort of nervous agitation in the household. And Edwina's personality, like her desire in St. Louis, she just kept trying to move when she could, to move a little bit closer to where the good people lived, the proper people lived, the DAR. That was her. She was DAR, Daughters of the American Revolution, kids. Look it up. So she, and that's all Amanda too. That desperate clinging, and it's 1937. So when you look at that time for women, I mean, it really was true what she says, that if you weren't prepared to occupy a position in life, and you weren't married, you were in deep trouble. So the second time around, all that research that I had time to read and just time to think, I think changed my performance. And as I said, now I have children in their 20s. So the things you say that you say you'll never say, you'll say. Once you become a parent, you're like, I swore I would never do what I just did. in terms of correcting them and yearning for them and over celebrating them. I mean, Amanda does all of that out of love and desperation, and I feel like I'm much friendlier with love and desperation now than before I had kids.
Than you were then.
So that,
Leigh, we also, and that's why we were chatting just before we, hit the record button and mentioned, Ellen's good run, but it was only 4 shows, and you had 2 weeks that was shortened, and you were sharing, and I want to jump into that conversation, that 2 weeks is not nearly enough.
I mean, I used to, the average run was 3 to 4 weeks. If you were doing the Christmas show, you'd have, although those of us who've done Christmas shows know, you'd have many more performances because that's your bread and butter. And then touring shows, you do many, many, many more shows. So I've done professional theater in Sweden for a year, and then in Pennsylvania, and other tours. And then you really are doing the show more. And I remember the first time I got to do a show about 15 times, and I was like, oh, okay, now I feel like I can breathe. You find spaces in the performance that you couldn't find before. You can listen in a different way. And there's a thing called circles of concentration. And so when you're under stress, your circle of concentration is very tight. It's, the worst is, cue line, like that's early circle of concentration. And then you can expand a little bit to listen, and then you can expand a little bit, but you don't get very far. But if you can perform for long enough, your circle of concentration can really expand infinitely and encompass more. And I think even though to an average audience member, they wouldn't see a big change, you feel more texture and depth. And I gotta say, I'm such a fan of live performance, because I've done some films and all that stuff, and I really like being on set. But I just always feel like when the audience shows up, there's another character who's finally coming, and when they come, the play is complete. And something about I get very high-minded, but I find it sacred when the audience comes in and sits down, and we make this agreement, this strange agreement, that I'm going to be lit and you're going to be in the dark, and you're not going to interrupt this except with sighs and laughter. And we're going to do this ritual. And only one time in my life did somebody jump up on stage and break the circle, and not because they were invited. So I think when you do the show over and over and again, you just get more open to possibility. I'm trying to shut up because I could talk a long time about these things.
That's why we have you as a guest, Leigh. I think we're both breathing into that a little bit. I think there's a circle of concentration also that happens in rehearsal space.
Mm,
That if you don't feel safe in the
mm.
the ability to learn becomes a mountain much higher than it is anyway. And then
And
finding your safety.
but here's the thing about feeling safe in rehearsal that's so interesting to me. It's, if somebody can say this is a safe space, I don't care. You have to behave. You have to make it a safe space. So I've directed professionally, uh, not so much since I moved up here, unfortunately, but I used to direct regionally theater professionally for a long time before I moved up here. And I think you make it safe by being on time, being prepared, not wasting other people's time, and being prepared to listen to them. But I also think that when you're directing, you make a safe space by being, you can run the room in a very pleasant way so that everyone's like, okay, this is not a chaotic mess. We had 3 hours, but we got a huge amount done. And of course, there's also physical safety and setting boundaries and not throwing people into intimacy scenes, which of course that's a whole other conversation. You've had Yvonne on, right? One of our only intimacy coordinators in the area. Yeah. Because I come from the old days where, you just had to work as not out if you had to make out on stage. And sometimes it was fine and sometimes it was really uncomfortable and bad. So there's that safety, but you're talking about the kind of safety that says you can make a mess today in rehearsal. Come on in, make a mess. I'm going to respect that because you showed up. You prepared the level I need you to prepare, and you went galloping off in a direction that was not right. But we all very clear now it wasn't right because you were able to go that way without me going, stop, 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 put your left hand down. I told you to come, So there's a lot of, it's such a delicate thing. And as a director, and I used to direct a lot of college productions, that was something I really tried to do. And again, not by saying this is a safe space, but by the way you behave. But by talking to people, if you have a really hard note, usually I try to give it to somebody one-on-one. Not, it doesn't take long. Just run down to the edge of the stage and just pull them aside. And try never to humiliate people. And unfortunately, I think there are some directors who just, I don't know if you don't get a chance to watch a lot of other directors once you become a director. But since I was always flipping back and forth, I got between acting and directing, and I think they forget what acting feels like. And so they treat actors poorly because they have forgotten how incredibly vulnerable you are when you're up there. And I don't care if you're doing a bust a gut comedy, you are vulnerable. And it helps to have a director who still remembers that somehow. I'm real big on safety, but not the safety that's in discussion right now. There's another whole, yeah.
You knew exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I was recently talking to one of my actors in Theater Voices about kind of the mentality of directors and their relationship with actors, and how maybe it is like an old school, idea that directors have to be strict and they have to belittle their actors, and that's how you're going to get it out of them. But it's a very outdated notion. I mean, that never was timely, I don't think. It was never called for.
No, and if you want an actor to bust wide open, ask them how they're doing today, really. And then listen, right? Don't say, okay, this is where you cry. Ellen, right now, look in the script, it says in italics, cry. It's like, you're never going to do it. But I said, okay, let's go real slow, but let's start with how are you? How's everything going? Ask an actor in an audition what parts they've dreamed of playing. Actors are ready to bust open. They just need to feel like it's going to be respected. What they're bringing to the table. I mean, we're all such sensitive little sea creatures. and it's the confusion of the business, which is a whole other discussion, that we have to be tough as nails and then, you know, completely open. It's I have found that confusing from the time I started studying acting. That that swing.
So of all the hats you wear in theater, Leigh, I'm
Mm.
going to ask you Sophie's choice. What's your favorite?
Oh God.
I know that's sort of low hanging fruit, but sorry.
No, I mean, um, I'm writing. I've always written a lot. I think writing is my last skill. I think I'm a pretty good writer. I have written a lot. I think if I had to choose, it would be acting, because that's the first thing that I fell in love with, and the thing I've been doing the longest, and the thing that I've studied the most. I didn't become a director till after I'd been an actor for about 10 years, um, and I just feel so at home doing the work of acting.
Mm.
I just like when I sit backstage during a run of a play. I'm not one of those actors who can leave very easily and sit in the dressing room and listen on the box. I can't. I really like to just be. I like to see how it's going every night. I like to sit in the wings, and I feel so grateful when I sit there. Like and also, you know, as I get older, you know, there's less and less opportunities. So I'm trying to be more alive and in the moment of each opportunity, because I feel that they're becoming finite. No matter what I try to do, it's just there's just not a lot out there. So I think I'd say acting, and then directing, and then writing. But I also taught acting for 40 years all over the place, and I stopped that 5 years ago. But I really love teaching. I loved teaching acting, and I taught everywhere. I taught in Sweden, I taught in Pennsylvania, I taught 2 trips to Africa, I taught at SUNY for 10 years, Russell Sage for 10 years. I've taught a lot, and I miss the students, and I truly love teaching acting. And I got a lot of theories about that too.
I was gonna say, what's your approach to teaching acting?
Well, I was lucky enough to study a whole bunch of different techniques, from Adler to neighborhood playhouse to, you know, of course, Strasberg, you know, because that's inundated everything. And then Augusto Boal, you know, theater games, Grotowski technique, Suzuki. I went to Japan and studied with Hitachi Suzuki and Bogart. And so when I am in a classroom situation, the first thing is like, who are these people and what do they need? You know, so I don't have any dogma. I just, you know, I've taught K through 12. I've taught corporate. I coach in New York State Public Defenders is another thing that I work with every year, coaching lawyers, public defenders. So it's, you know, what do they need? And then I just draw on my bag of techniques and design a class for them. I do believe that actors have to be in their body. So if I can, I start with a lot of movement work. Um, and not particularly woo woo, but just like roll up and down the spine and shake out and, you know, and move around. And I do worry that the younger generation coming up has moves less than ever before, for a couple reasons. Their parents are all terrified of pedophiles, um, because of media. I don't think the threat is any greater. I think media has pumped the threat up. So I'm talking about kids who don't go outdoors. That's my dog barking in the background.
And let me jump in.
And
You are right. The research shows that
yeah,
stranger abductions
yes,
really have not changed.
no, they really haven't. And so, but you haven't. As I watched with my kids growing up here, out in, you know, out in Kinderhook, you know, you have parents who don't let their kids play outside, out in this suburban, leafy. You know, I walk in the woods every day, and I talk to women who said they would be afraid to walk in the woods behind the school.
And you
And
know,
so,
I'm just going to jump in and do the mental
yeah,
health push here. There's some research
please.
just out now that's tying the growing, the surge of mental health problems with our youth to the fact that they have not been allowed to explore, to play, to express, that they have been over parented. It's fascinating research. So,
And to take risks, and through risk taking, only through risk taking of many different kinds, can you have some form of mastery. And without having a sense of mastery, you don't have any sense of confidence or accomplishment. Now, you can tell me till you're blue in the face that playing video games has all these benefits. I mean, I was able to be fairly radical with my kids. They never had Xboxes. I never bought them any video games. Full stop. No. Because if they wanted to do something creative, and also all their friends had them, so they would go over and do sleepovers and come back like with bloodshot eyes because they literally would not sleep all night. They'd be up playing these horrible war games. So what you have is this generation of college kids coming, and with the phones, they get less sleep. There's there are a lot of mental health issues, as you know. Some of them were just unidentified before. Now we can identify them, which is the good part. A lot of anxiety and depression, and they don't have mastery because of the way that they have been overparented or whatever it is over their own bodies. And then you add on top of that something that I found really sad towards the end of my teaching, which is that every touch, and it's a very American thing, by the way, every touch is sexual. So if I'm working with kids and I'm trying to do a touch response exercise, I did that stuff for years. And suddenly there was this sort of weird vibe around it, and the kids were not comfortable with physical contact. And so you're like, oh, well, I used to come in and say, let's all massage each other's shoulders in a circle. Like, let's, let's chill it, And suddenly that was like, I don't know, it really changed. And I can understand about privacy and safety and all of that, but I felt that there was a loss in the sense of joy and freedom of being in your body. And if your kids aren't allowed to take risks, I don't know how they can master anything. And therefore, some of the younger kids coming out, they have dreams, but they're afraid to be vulnerable to take the risks. And man, if you want to be in a risk profession, it's acting. I mean, we know that. Anybody's been to an audition, and I'm sure it's just the worst, most terrifying. No win. I'm sorry. I hate them. Right? But you have to do them. You have to do them. And you have to do them over and over and over again. So I feel a little sad where I would be running, like a workout circle. And you have young students who have bad backs and bad knees. They're 19 years old. They're 18 years old. And they will say, I got a bad back, or my knees are bad, or whatever. And I would just feel like, wow, how does that happen so young? It has to be, just not moving enough. So this is all coming back to how do I teach acting? The first thing I do is try to, kind of check in, because if somebody's standing in a circle and they're not holding a phone and they're not holding anything and they're just standing there and you're doing things, you can read a whole lot of stuff. You're not going to tell them what you're seeing because that would be too much. That's wrong. But you can see like, okay, they're not living at all, from the chest down, or they have this eagerness, or they're jittery, or they can't, their eyes aren't, you see it. And only by taking away all of the desks and the props and do you get that. And that's where you need to start from, I believe.
It's interesting that just along what you were talking about, the mentality of the theater on the youth as well. I was having a conversation where my students need to see a production, and they said, well, how long is it? And the runtime is 90 minutes with no intermission. And someone really seemed surprised at that. 90 whole minutes, that I can't be on my phone. And
yeah,
I thought, what a loss that we've had of, the not being vulnerable enough to just let yourself escape into a show, for 90 minutes, to feel that you have to be connected to technology, or, not allowing yourself to move into that.
I and I feel terrible if this was like a beat up session on the generation coming up, but I have felt for me it is a kind of a sadness that there's anxiety around turning the phone off for 90 minutes. And I used to sort of jokingly say, like, if you're a pediatric neurosurgeon, you can keep your phone on. But other than that, no. And if it's your parents calling in a college class, you need to tell them that when you're, I mean, it really got, and then the second part of it as a professor is getting recorded without your permission, because then anything you say can be taken out of context, or clips could be shown. And I kind of dodge that too, because I do tend to swear a lot. Most of the time, nobody cares. It's perfectly fine. But you take a clip out of context, right? So I would put things in my syllabus about nothing can be recorded without the permission of the students and the teacher. Also, I wouldn't want anybody recorded doing a warm up. If you're doing downward dog and upward dog and jumping around like a frog, you don't need anybody that doesn't need to be recorded. It's fine. Like, we need to do things that aren't seen, that are just exist in the studio, and then that's where they stay. That's where that creativity stays.
So, Leigh,
but
if all this is
Yeah.
going on, and you're not teaching now, and I'm sure there were others with your expertise who've walked away, what does that say for us as performers, the health of live theater going forward?
Well, I think there will always be people who want to become actors. And I think the Capital Region is having a wonderful new generation coming up, mostly through non-professional or community theater, like Brian Sheldon's play, which was so wonderful, and Hard Candy at Troy Foundry. We have this great new generation blossoming, so that will always be there. That said, the other stream is, you want to be an actor, you go to college, and then you get an MFA in acting. And I graduated way before MFAs were considered, necessary. I never got an MFA. And people are going into debt for acting MFAs. I think that should not be a thing. I think either you go and you could get into one of the schools that you get a ride and a stipend, or don't get an MFA. But to go into debt in any of the arts is insane. But the problem is, and this has always been true, that generally it's people who come from families that can fund them and back them up for their early years, that can afford to go into acting, that they aren't going to be homeless if they fail. They can fly home for a while, as I've seen so many students do. They go right to LA or New York City. They're going to change the world. And 6 months later, you see them and they're just beaten up. That first experience in those cities can just beat you up. And some people last longer, and some few people have a success. But what we're doing is, we have a lot of kids from money, mostly white, who can go and get this high level training, and they can afford to stay or manage a few more years than some other people. But think of all the talent we're losing. Think of all the talent that isn't getting training, that isn't getting opportunity. And I do believe theater's changing it, and I'm so happy about it. But it's a real problem. And then the flip side of that is, who goes to theater? It's mostly old white people.
We've
Why?
been talking about this a lot of shows here, Leigh.
Yeah, because we have the time and we have the money. My husband just retired last year. We see a fair amount of theater. We have the time and we have the money. And then you go and you're like, okay, so now we're trying to make theater more inclusive for all communities. But the old white people going to theater, I think sometimes just want to see themselves on stage. You know what I mean? Like, it's like this thing of, I don't think that's universally true by any means. But I think it's going to be a problem with theater as long as we don't fund it, as we don't in America, and it's not really respected. If you want to be respected as an actor, you need to go into television.
Mm,
That's where the
mm.
respect is.
I'm going to
Television
jump
and
in.
film.
I'm the timekeeper. Ellen, I see it flying by on us. I know you've got a couple of questions, but let's get that plug in before we get there.
Yeah, so please make sure everybody go check out I Theater Saratoga, doing The Murder of Roger Ackroyd from October 27th to November 5th in Saratoga Springs. It's a world premiere mystery adapted by Mary Jane Hansen. If you love Agatha Christie, it's right up your alley. And in the last few seconds that we have, Leigh, we do a close-up segment. There are just some rapid fire questions all about you. Are you ready for your close-up, Leigh?
Always.
What was the moment where you just knew I have to do theater?
I was in seventh grade, living in Las Vegas, and I had a crush on somebody named Mark Wallaker. And I took a drama class, and the teacher told me to become the color yellow. And I got up on stage and I became the color yellow. And I was absolutely convinced I was the color yellow. And Mark laughed at me, and I didn't care because
What
I
is
was the color yellow.
what is a show that has had a major impact on your life? Either something that you've been involved in or seen?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I would say there's two Greeks. One is when I was in the Women of Bacchus at the Bloomsburg Theater Ensemble, and I was so proud of our production. We were able to bring in master artists beforehand to train us, to prepare us for what we call the Keystone Productions. And then years later, I adapted and directed Hippolytus at SUNY Albany. And I can't tell you how proud I was of that cast, of our adaptation, uh, and the things that I accomplished. Also working with the choreographer Ion Beauchamp and my husband, who had all the actors playing instruments, including didgeridoos that we built and all this kind of stuff. So it's all live sound. But I mean, playing Martha and Virginia Woolf two different times. There's just I've really had the opportunity to dig into some major scripts, and I think they all live inside you, which is why it was so hard when the show closed early this weekend, because it's a visceral loss. It's not just a like, oh, my friends didn't get to see my show. It's like I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared to say goodbye. So,
Any shows on the bucket list to either perform in or direct?
oh, I want to do King Lear. I want to play King Lear. I also want to play Scrooge. I've been trying to play Scrooge for years, everywhere I've worked. And it's partly because I have seen so many men play Scrooge and complain about it. They complain bitterly about what a hard role it is and how they have to be on stage all the time. And and I'm like, give me that role. I don't want to play it like a woman. I want to play it like Scrooge. Um, so definitely that. Also, Mother Courage. I would like to play Mother Courage. Um, yeah, I think those are the first ones that come to mind right now.
And in our last minute, we've talked a lot about the youth and you teaching and everything. What advice would you pass on to the young people listening who are pursuing acting?
You need to be curious. You need to ask people questions, and you need to go and see performances. And you have to be curious. If you're not curious, it ain't gonna work. You have to be curious about why that guy walking down the street is walking that way. Why is his weight shifting that way? What do his shoes look like? Do you assume he's lonely because he's alone? Maybe he's going home to, he's got 3 boyfriends in that house. You have to be curious about the plays that are being done around you. You have to be curious about human behavior. You have to be curious about your own behavior. I met a guy the other night. I went to see English at Barrington Stage last week. Extraordinary play. I met this guy young man who had graduated from acting in Boston, took a train to Pittsfield, didn't even have a place to stay for the night. He wanted to see English because the playwright was in the performance that we saw, and the place won a Pulitzer. He wanted to see the play that bad. And I'm standing by the stage door talking to him. He's like, I don't know where I'm staying tonight. And so I helped him find a motel. I would have brought him to my house, but it was like an hour in each direction. And I just thought I said, this kid's going to be fine. He's going to be fine because he was that driven just to see a production. So my advice is put down the phone, look around every day, and stay curious.
What a great place for us to say thank you.
What a pleasure. I just feel like we just
It's like a 2-week run. We really needed a month, right?
Yeah. This is great. Thank you so much for asking me to do this.
Oh, we so appreciated you being on with us. A quick reminder, Theater Saratoga, world premiere production of Agatha Christie's Murder of Roger Ackroyd. And it runs, Ellen, help me. I'm looking.
October 27th and November 5th.
I only printed off a little bit of it. Again, Leigh, thank you. Can't wait to see you on stage again.
Thank you. You too. Nice to meet you, Ellen.
You too. And for all our listeners, thank you so much. We'll catch you next time. I'm Ellen Cribbs.
And I'm Benita Zahn. Take care.
Thank you so much for listening to the Everything Theater podcast. Special thanks goes out to Alice Grinling for our photography and Justin Friello for composing our amazing theme song. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. If you want to share your thoughts or what's going on in your theater community, you can reach out to us on social media or through our email at everythingtheaterpodcast@gmail.com. Till next time, it's everything, everything, everything.